Welcome to Chapter 11, Law Enforcement Roles and Responses. So what we're going to be covering in this chapter is basically an overview of our law enforcement agencies, mostly federal, and how they, or what their roles are in our world of computer crime. And again, this is going to be a very strategic overview. We're not going to dig too far into the weeds on the agencies, but it's important for you to know, how many different departments and how many different organizations provide services, and also where they provide services. So with that, provide an overview of the roles and responses, describe local law enforcement computer crime, and identify the factors that have limited local law enforcement against the digital crime. And you'll find we'll be talking about that towards the end of the slide set. Um, but first, let's do a quick review or overview of our federal government and the agencies that are there to help us. First of all, federal agencies, they have technical expertise, political clout to obtain financial resources, and the agencies have increasingly reorganized in an effort to channel resources. So basically what this is saying is they have jurisdiction. And this is what it really comes down to. When you're doing computer crime cases, things such as that in the United States, it's real easy to find yourself overwhelmed, especially if you're a small local law enforcement agency and you work your way into some type of national crime, national child predator ring, international predator ring. Any of those types of organizations are going to give a state and local guy, a lot of hassle. And the federal agencies, they are used to dealing with national, international cases. So they have technical expertise, and they have unique expertise in being able to um, track down or communicate with other nationalities. They have resources into Interpol. They have resources into other national jurisdictions, and they have the State Department on speed dial basically, so they can go take or do things that they need to do. And most federal agencies have this. They also have the money, and when you get down to it, a computer crime is going to be prosecuted or is going to be looked into until the money runs out. And I'll explain. When I was at the sheriff's office, um, several times the prosecutor or one of the ADAs would come down and say, "Look, we can we can only afford X amount of hours on this case. What do you have?" And you would say something like, "Well, I found 2,000 pictures of child pornography, but I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's email, et cetera, et cetera." And they would say, "Nope, stop. We're going to charge them with 2,000 counts of child pornography. That's good enough, and we'll move to trial." So there are times when the money or the budgets don't allow for an extensive investigation. They don't allow you to, can't travel around the country to go get your evidence. You're not going to be sent to Europe to interview witnesses, things such as that. And these are all resources the federal agency has. And there's also a difference when the guy walks in, and I worked a couple of cases with field agents out in Missouri. And I remember one case we walked in, and I whipped out my sheriff's badge, and that was all cool. And then he whipped out his FBI badge, and he just took away the absolute coolness factor. And everybody kind of bristled and sat up because now the FBI was there. So the FBI comes with a clout. The federal government comes with a clout. The IRS walks in and says, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you." They have clout as opposed to your local police officer coming in saying, "Hey, we want to talk to you about a financial crime." So they definitely have that clout. And then the agencies, they're always looking to task force. One of the things I love about the government is the task force, because everybody wants to be on a task force, and everybody has a task force, and there are task forces that watch task forces, and they're constantly trying to pool and make efficient the resources they have available to them. And that's something that you'll definitely see when you're dealing with the federal government or the national authorities. And each one of these national authorities also has specific sections, whether it be CSIPs or the RCFLs or any one of those organizations that have a specific child predator section, a fraud section, a hacking and cybercrime section like CHIPS. They're all housed within these federal governments. You don't find, unless you have a really, really big city like New York City, Chicago, San Francisco, you'll find sections within those larger agencies that are predominantly assigned to do a specific thing. But otherwise, you'll end up with a general crimes detective or a general crimes computer guy that's not really trained to do specifically that type of crime. He's more of a general person that kind of finds his way around in these crimes until he gets to a point where he can't do anything, and he brings in, possibly somebody from the federal government that has a expertise in that field. All right, so Department of Justice. Department of Justice established in 1870. Department of Justice is headed by the chief law enforcement officer of the federal government, and the Attorney General oversees administrative justice on the federal level. The Attorney General represents the United States in all legal matters. Okay, so anytime that the government's involved in something, you're going to be dealing with the Attorney General. Anytime that our government is dealing with another government, the Department of Justice may or may not be involved. The Department of Justice, as you well know, gets involved when we have accusations that are involving federal political officials. Anytime we have racial discord or things such as that, where state or local government may hamper the ability of a normal law enforcement agency to do their job, the Attorney General's office is there pretty much to jump in and help out. Now, within the Attorney General's office, there's two organizations. There's CCIPS, which is the Computer Crime and Intellectual Property section. And these are attorneys that specialize in computer-related crimes, e-commerce, electronic privacy crimes. And they do a really good job of trying to train the other prosecutors and attorneys around the country to be prepared for technology crimes. And you'd be very surprised how many attorneys and people, prosecutors, just are not comfortable with doing a technology crime and actually will let a technology crime go away because they don't want to deal with that technology crime. They don't feel they have the capacity or the capability to do a good job. And if you look across the prosecutions as applied to the number of arrests for child pornography, for example, you'll find there's just a disproportionate number of pleadings that are taken by prosecutors that don't want to go to trial. They would rather the guy plead out, take a lesser included offense, and go on his way to jail, instead of going into court and having to deal with this technology-based crime, which they may or may not be competent or capable to run. And again, it's an intimidation. Technology crimes for a lot of defense attorneys, or excuse me, prosecution attorneys, is a very daunting task because they don't understand technology. And again, CCIPS does a great job of training. They're constantly training prosecutors and ADAs and law enforcement. Most of their training is free. Every once in a while, you'll have a paid-for course, and that's usually for the equipment or something else. But other than that, most of their stuff is free. They're doing a lot of online webinars now. So there's a lot of outreach going on to kind of bring everybody up to speed. Another unit housed by Department of Justice is something called the CHIP. They're a computer hacking intellectual property unit, and CHIP unit focuses on prosecuting computer hacking and fraud. And if you want to go look at success stories, you can go to the Department of Justice, click on their website, and they list out the prosecutions or the computer crimes that they have worked recently, successful prosecutions that they have taken down recently. It's a really good resource to go up and look up past incidents, see what kind of crimes are going on, see how somebody was found out to be involved in a computer crime, look at some of the problems that the prosecutor might have had or the detective on the scene had when collecting evidence, what the challenges to evidence were. These are all interesting to you because these are all things that you're going to have to deal with as you're going through being a criminal or a cybercrime investigator or detective. You're going to have to identify those things that are kind of blockers or impediments to your prosecution. So if you've got a law enforcement officer that goes out there and grabs the phone and starts searching through the phone looking for text messages, things like that, you as the prosecutor may have to defend that in court and say, no, no, our laws do apply and we are allowed to do what we're doing. Well, you may end up going back to the chip section and asking them, hey, how do I kind of get us out of this jam? We had a police officer that may have conducted an illegal search. Is there case law or are there precedents that can help us out? And again, these guys will definitely help you with questions like that. They are a really good resource to work with. The FBI. The FBI basically has a broad mandate that authorizes to protect the U.S. from terror, foreign intelligence agency, as well as investigate any federal crime not specifically designated to another agency. The FBI has been kind of the premier focal point for, as if you want to, classify one on the child predators and the computer crimes. They have done a very good job, just like the Secret Service has done a really good job, and Customs did a really good job. The FBI is kind of one of those agencies that has gone out of its way to kind of lay the path for the collection and prosecution of child pornography and fraud investigations using the computer. They also do a lot of work with groups like Al Qaeda and things like that, where you have links to terrorism through the computer. These guys are very good at laying out a nodal network or a nodal analysis, giving you a view into the cell or a view into a group of people. So they do a really good job with that. The FBI is headquartered in D.C., 56 field offices. Protection of the United States from cyber-based attacks and high technology is its third priority behind terror and foreign intelligence, and the FBI is leading the charge to investigate and prosecute cyber crimes. All right. So one of the things that the FBI is really good, or again, really good about doing, is stopping online sexual predators. They do a great job. They work with National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. They also do a ton of seminars. They do a lot of training. They're also out there looking for the guys doing the serious computer crimes. You get your McNicks, Dr. Dreads, some of the well-known computer hackers of the day were all guys that were caught by the FBI. The FBI uses civilian law or the local law enforcement a lot. You'll find that you'll end up working with their task force, especially in local-based crimes where you have that local knowledge and flavor. The FBI is not shy about asking for your help. Two-way flow of communication sometimes is not as open. Coming from the federal side, when I worked for the government in CID and the Army, to going to the local department, I could see the disparity of which way the funnel of information went. A lot of times information goes up, but funneled information did not come back down, which can cause a frustration. You may hear local law enforcement complain about the FBI not being as helpful as they could be. But again, a lot of that comes down to the office, the relationship you have with that office. And we had a great relationship with our office in Springfield, Missouri, and we had a great two-way communication going back and forth. But again, that's not always what you hear. So again, you kind of have to play it by ear on where you're at in the country and the kind of relationship that office has with the local folks. They stop operations targeting U.S. intellectual property. If you think about it, our copyright works great until 12 miles outside the United States, and then it doesn't apply. So USC or U.S. code applies to U.S. installations, federal property, but it doesn't apply to China. It doesn't apply to Taiwan. It doesn't apply to places that have been found to be violators of copyright or international copyright protection. So the FBI is a part of enforcement of international copyright, uh, the enforcement of theft of intellectual property, and things like that. Dismantle national and transnational organized crime groups engaging in internet fraud. These guys are, FBI spends a lot of time tracking down the Russian gangs, the South American cartels, where they have gone online and they are able to put in an organization or a structure that allows for the targeting and or the proliferation of a terrorist organization or a national group or something such as that. Um, the FBI does a real good job on keeping those links, and you'll go in sometimes if you ever get a chance. You'll be involved in a task force, and you'll see the nodal span or nodal analysis map that is generated during these investigations, and it's truly pretty amazing sometimes to see all the connections that one person may have to the spider web or spiral of all the people out there. All right, and the RCFLs. The RCFLs, we remember the RCFL in Missouri. The RCFLs provide forensic lab support and training programs. And basically what happens is your department will join an RCFL. Funding will be provided for your detectives or your agency to attend their training. There will also be funding from the Sheriff's Department to provide some equipment to the RCFL if there's a need. But normally what the RCFL has is one of everything. So they have all of these devices and all of these great pieces of equipment that are stored at this regional computer forensic lab. And then as a member of the task force, your agency then can go use a tool or a piece of equipment to conduct your computer crime without your agency having to cough up the dime for that equipment. A lot of times you're not going to get somebody to buy you a specific piece of equipment because there just is not that much of a need in your county or jurisdiction. Or the sheriff or the police chief just doesn't see a need for the computer crime guys to have new toys or tools, as they call them, and you just you don't get the products that you need to support what it is you want to do. We see this a lot, especially in cell phone investigations, where the RCFL will have the latest and greatest of the cell phone tools, and then you'll go to them and use their tools and produce your reports, etc. Internet Crime Complaint Center provides federal agencies a central repository for complaints related to internet fraud. This is basically a service that's put out by the FBI to the civilian populace. And if you want to report a crime, or if you want to report a computer-related crime, or if other agencies want to get with the FBI, they can use the ICC or ICCC3 for this. It's more of a tip line, kind of like a 911 for computer fraud. It serves a great purpose. We used to receive tips from the FBI. We were a member of their task force, so they would send us, say, this is in your jurisdiction. Can you look into this type thing? So you would get things asking you to help the federal organizations. So IC3 provides a great resource for civilian population, local law enforcement, and then other federal agencies that can interact or communicate with the FBI about computer-related crime and things that are going on. The FBI also sponsors the InfraGard. I was a member of InfraGard up until I think last year when we were part of the Tampa InfraGard. In fact, HTCI High Tech Crime Institute is now a business sponsor of the Tampa Bay InfraGard. And basically what InfraGard does, it takes all of industry and everybody communicates about what's going on. So what'll happen is you'll have a group get together, and it's all of your IT folks. It's all of the people from the local area, from all the IT departments, all your security folks get into one room, and then they start talking about, what's going on. What threats are they seeing? What threats have happened? Or you'll get a briefing or a seminar put on by the local agency or the local FBI agency. Their agents will come out and they'll do training, or they'll bring someone in to do training, etc. But the InfraGard is a really neat organization. For those of you that are part of some of these other IT departments or investigative units, you really should look into InfraGard, about being a member of InfraGard, because you'll find all kinds of great information, good training, things such as that you will find through the InfraGard system. All right, NSA. NSA builds itself out as the nation's preeminent cryptologic organization. If you want to take a really cool tour, go up to the NSA Museum up in DC. It's actually in Maryland, but if you're up visiting DC and you're looking at all the museums, make a trip out to the Spy Museum, and you will see some really, really cool tools and things have been used over the years for cryptology. They have the old World War II, I'm going to lose the name of it, Enigma machine. That's located there. But the NSA, I mean, that's what they do: encryption, decryption. Looking into the protection of our information systems. That is what the NSA is supposed to do. Collecting information, collecting data. These are all things on foreign nationals, on foreign events. This is what the NSA is really good at. It's also a lead agency. It's responsible for monitoring and protecting all of the federal governments and networks from any form of cyber terrorism. So if something happens or somebody is trying to hack us or do something crazy, the NSA is definitely going to be involved. And they're also responsible for setting up the safety guards to prevent us from being a part of an attack, things such as that. And one of the tools they use is the honeypot. They'll set up pretend sites or government sites, inviting basically the bad guys to hack them, and then they will, use that as a tool. One, to learn how people are attacking, but two, also to go out and track down the people that are attacking. NSA houses InfoSec, education and training program. Yet again, another super good training opportunity. A lot of it is free if you're a federal agency. A lot of it is free. There are some paid programs that go through InfoSec, but it is definitely worth looking into. And the InfoSec program, depending on your organization, does count towards those continuing education credits. I know that in Missouri, some post level for us in kind of the add-on tools, they didn't have anything that was based on just computer crime, but they did have a specialty section, and that applied to that specialty section. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC. FTC's primary enforcement mechanism is divided into 7 divisions: enforcement, advertising practices, financial practices, marketing practices, planning and information, consumer and business, education programs, and privacy and identity. The FTC does a really good job on letting people know what's going on. So advertising practices, and then setting up rules to follow by, ways to safeguard yourself, best practices and policies and procedures. These are all things that are designed by the FTC. They're also designed to provide local assistance, to give you help, and curb the misuse of theft of personal information. Okay, so if you got a stalking ring, an identity theft ring, things such as that in your area, the Federal Trade Commission is definitely somebody that will assist you with that. They are they are again there to protect the trade and commerce, and when you have people that are stealing identities, they're directly affecting that trade. And the FCC operates Consumer Sentinel, a centralized database of identity theft complaints used to compile statistics regarding incidents of identity theft. When I started out at the Sheriff's Department, there were no real laws for identity theft. Identity theft was more of um, a civil matter, as they would call it. They would say, "Oh well, that's not identity theft. That's a civil thing. Someone stole your credit cards and they stole your information. That has nothing to do with the government." And then laws were passed in the early 2000s that turned it into a crime. And when it turned it into a crime, identity theft exploded. It wasn't that there was new identity theft. It was the fact that identity theft had never been reported. So Consumer Sentinel is a database that was set up to track, uh, identity theft, track crimes of identity theft, and provide statistical analysis of the trending of identity theft. The Postal Service. Postal Service Inspection Service provides businesses with a safe venue for exchange of funds and securities and provides private citizens a safe and secure way to transmit correspondence. In the early 90s, the Postal Service was the premier child pornography service because everything went through the post. So they were they were the best professionals to go after child pornography, and they had a huge section that was dedicated to it. Since the change to the computer, we not as much goes through the mail anymore. A lot more of it goes through the internet, so they lost a little bit of its luster. But that being said, they are still very, very good at the child pornography investigations and things such as that, because they are still a medium that's used by many predators to send pictures and videos and things like that, so, back and forth, that are too big to be on the computer. Also, some people believe that sending it through the post is a lot safer than sending it through the internet for tracking purposes, etc. And what they don't realize is the Postal Service, has a very resilient program in place to prevent, the tracking and, the management of investigations involving child pornography. So the Postal Service provides a couple of services: mail theft reporting system and the child exploitation cases. These are both services that can be accessed by the private citizen. They're also uh, able to be accessed by local and state government agencies that are looking for help when it comes to the transportation or uh, loss of items that were mail bound, somebody breaking into the mail, uh, stealing checks, all of that kind of stuff can be reported through this mail theft reporting system. And then obviously the child exploitation cases, things can be reported to the child exploitation uh, folks at the Postal Service to do their investigations. All right, Department of Energy. Some of you probably even thought the Department of Energy had a computer section or a police force. They actually have a pretty big police force. Um, DOE's main responsibilities revolve around domestic energy production and conservation and efficiency. The increased reliance on computerized technology to operate and administer the nation's energy producing infrastructure has led to the development of numerous cyber security programs in DOE. The DOE Cyber Incident Response Capability, or CERC, is one of those organizations. If you have something that's related to the protection of the grid, the CERC or the DOE CERC will be the agency that is dispatched out to you. And again, the DOE basically takes care of anything that could affect the public utilities, national infrastructure. It all falls under the Department of Energy. So if you're talking about somebody that is able to exit or enter into a power plant or some type of electric exchange, things such as that. Department of Energy will be a part of that. And believe it or not, Department of Energy spends a lot of its time on protection. They have a very large kind of cadre of professional um, malware and virus protection experts that spend a lot of time making sure that their systems are safe. They have a very strict and controlled uh, program. So it's a pretty resilient little organization. Um, when it comes to the cyber stuff, they take their mission very responsibly, and they're very dedicated to providing that protection. So if any of you are looking at careers kind of not in the mainstream, but you're looking for something where people are very involved and they have quite a lot of investigations, the Department of Energy is definitely one of those places to look. Homeland Security. DHS was designed by President Bush in September 11th of 2001. Homeland Security improves information sharing among federal law enforcement agencies, consolidates a host of over 100 offices, increases interagency coordination in the fight against domestic terror. When you're looking at post 9/11, there was an outcry from the federal organizations to basically saying, hey, we have no unifying organization that's bringing us together. And what they determined was DHS, or Department of Homeland Security, was going to be that agency that was going to work with all of the federal agencies and make sure that information went to the right place, make sure that investigations weren't sent kind of awry or got lost in the framework of all of our different federal agencies. So this streamlining, or this DHS streamline, which actually was in the works for quite a while, it just was never implemented, uh, really helped out and really mapped out how the federal government looks at and investigates computer crime in the nation today. DHS has the NCSD. It has a National or Cyber Security Division, which has two tasks: build and maintain an effective national cyberspace response system, and second, implement a cyber risk management program to protect critical infrastructure. So when we talk about protection of the actual overall network, all of our maze and all of our nodes, especially federal government nodes, you are looking at DHS. If you're talking about something involving the banking industry or protection, or you're talking about critical infrastructure, beyond Department of Energy, so water resources and traffic signals and railroads and things such as that. Now you're talking about the NCSD and their responsibility to protect our national interests. And again, like DOE, this is a really cool agency. They have a lot of power and a lot of investigators, and they're constantly looking for the best and the brightest. So I know some of you in class would definitely fit into that mold. Other programs for DHS, they have the National Cyber Alert System, CyberCop Portal Program, and that's basically a assistance program that allows people to log into this. Um, it's almost like it's not quite a Facebook. It's more like a LinkedIn for investigators. You put your information in there. You can share information. Someone's looking for someone in Missouri at this zip code. They can find someone in that portal program. The Computer Emergency Response, or CERT, they are a team that's dispatched in case of a incident involving infrastructure. I know they've worked closely with industry, so when industry has a serious event, they can be sent out and they can certainly be of assistance to that industry. National Cyber Response Coordination Group. These are groups that, or a group that takes all of the inputs and puts it into the right channel. Who's responsible for what? Where does this go? Who does it belong to? And that's really one of their biggest mandates as an organization. And then We have ICE, which is under the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and ICE is responsible for identifying, investigating weaknesses within national borders. Um, ICE actually does a really good job also in child pornography. They also have a pretty large child exploitation, and that falls under the C3 group. And the group does computer forensics, cyber crimes, information technology, and administration. They also do a lot of training as well. So the C3 group, if you can get into any of their organizations training, they're well worth going to, and would definitely uh, promote their training. ICE operates the child exploitation sector, which coordinates Operation Predator. Again, another federal agency that has a little bit different view of child pornography and the enforcement of child pornography, what their jurisdictional claim or jurisdictional reach is. You know, national borders, you know, trafficking internationally falls very much into your ICE operations. Um, you'll find that they work very closely with the FBI when it comes to doing investigations, especially ones involving you know, the United States or you know, nationals within our country that are doing something bad. You'll find that ICE and the FBI work very well in conjunction with each other um, to protect children against cyber predators. ICE operates the cyber crimes section, which coordinates Operation Apothecary, another organization or another sub-organization of ICE that provides cybercrime assistance, training, etc. Again, these organizations are really, really good, and they do a lot of coordination. ICE does a great job of coordinating through other organizations to you know, enhance their skills, but also their manpower. They don't have as large a manpower as some of the other sections. From what I understand, that's changing. They're beefing them up, making them much more resilient in nature. So you're going to see a larger or a growth in ICE agents and um, people such as that over the next few years, especially with this administration, which is very pro ICE. Secret Service. Financial Crimes Division is the agency's primary tool in the fight against computer crime. So, Secret Service does a lot, especially when you're dealing with monetary fraud. You got people out there printing, counterfeiting money, things such as that. They have a large section that does, um, you know, just a really, really good job of getting out and looking at the financial crimes, financial fraud. Um, Finding the people that are producing the fake identities, tracking down the identity theft that led to that kind of stuff. They do a really good job of that. So they're kind of another unit that spends a lot of time in that financial fraud area. And then the primary jurisdiction in cases involving access device fraud, investigating computer fraud related to computers and systems. They're ones that really deal with the computer fraud, or excuse me, credit card fraud. You know, when someone's got a skimmer and they're ripping off credit cards at restaurants, they're very involved in finding the ring and who's running that ring of people that are doing that. 'Cause normally the people that are using the skimmers are not the people you're looking for. They're usually the people that are working for the people you're looking for. So Secret Service does a really good job investigating those folks. They do have a limited section, and they do work with child pornography. Just about every section and every government agency has a little bit of a tie into the child pornography and computer fraud is also another one that's kind of general. So you're going to see that pretty much through the entire breadth of all the agencies. Everybody has a little bit of tie, and some of that comes down to child pornography is a just a crime that, you know, everybody wants to try and stop, and everybody wants to be involved in it. It's a high profile crime. Um, it's not you know, it's not like fraud where you say I'm a fraud investigator and people are like, oh, that's great. If you say I'm a child pornography investigator, or I'm out there catching the child predators, people are normally a lot more in tune with that, and like, really, what? Wow, that must be really exciting. I don't think I've in the years I did the fraud investigation, I don't think anybody ever said to me, "Wow, that's exciting." But when I was in the child pornography task force, people would always say, "Wow, that must be really rewarding, must be really exciting." So, it's definitely one of those areas that every agency wants to have a little bit of input, because it is, something that brings some attention to their organization. All right, so when we're talking about state and local enforcement, now we've kind of moved away from the federal role and the federal kind of overreach and review. Now we start talking about our local, state, county, um, regional crime task forces, things such as that. Citizens are more willing to report computer criminal activities. Local officers may not have the capacity of understanding to investigate such crimes. So you have this kind of disparity that's growing. What they're talking about here is you've got people that are willing to come in and start reporting computer crime. So you see an increase in computer crime. The problem is local police departments have not invested monies in computer crime investigators. So you have a guy that's been on the force for 15 years. One day he's the robbery crime investigator. The opening for the computer crime investigator comes up. He says, "Hey, I really want to get promoted to sergeant, and that's a sergeant position, so I'm going to go apply for that job." He gets the job. Now you have a sergeant who's in charge of the computer crime section, who's never been to any training and has no idea what computer crimes are. This happens more and more in local law enforcement than you would imagine. I've trained many classes, and I've asked for, "Hey, what do you do?" And a guy will say, "I'm the chief of the computer crime section for such and such." And you start teaching the class, and the person really has no knowledge of anything computer related. So you find out very quickly that departments just are not investing in the computer crimes, not especially not to the level that your federal agencies are. And a lot of that comes down to just jurisdictional issues. You may have a department that's too small. You may have a four-man department. You don't have the luxury to have a section for computer crime and a section for burglary. You may just have enough to have three guys that work the road, and they all do general crimes investigations. You may have a department that's not vested into computer crimes. They don't see the need, or the population doesn't see the need. They just don't care. They'd rather you enforce some other crime that is more relevant to the area that they're from. And that's all depends on the regional area that you come from. And then, citizens are getting more and more educated. They're watching MTV's Catfish program, and they're watching all these other CSI forensics programs, and they're watching NCIS, forensics, and all these great shows that are teaching everybody what computer crime is. And the problem is now you got all these people reporting these crimes. Some of them are crimes, some of them are not. But because of TV and because of the increase in everybody talking about computer crime, now everybody wants to be involved in it. And before, nobody really understood it, nobody really cared, and nobody reported it. Well, now people do care, now people do understand it, they're reporting it. The problem is law enforcement is just not keeping up with the education and the resources to be able to handle that increase of reports. There appears to be a lack of recognition and support from upper level management within police departments and agencies. Again, this comes back to your department. Your sheriff has a choice. And I was at the National Sheriff's Association, and I remember we had a booth for computer crime training, and right next to us was a light bar display, and on the other side of us was a pistol company. And those two organizations probably pulled 1,000 a day, people coming in looking at light bars and looking at guns all day long. And then there was this void between the two of them that was called, High Tech Crime Institute and his computer training, that nobody came by. I think we got one or two people that got kind of pushed over to us as a penalty for, by their sheriffs, and they came over and said, "Yeah, I got to get some information. we probably won't send anybody, but I figured I'd come get some information. So, it's just not, the computer crime training is just not sexy. It's not cool. So if a sheriff's got, $1,000 to spend, he can buy a new light bar, which is cool and flashy, or he can send someone to computer crime training. And 9 times out of 10, the sheriff will buy the new light bar because he just doesn't see or understand the need for the computer crime training. That's really not their responsibility. That's what you got the feds for, and that's an unfortunate thing. But it's very much what you see across the board with local departments, and you hear the complaints from local police officers, etc. Um, and basically, the four things that everybody always talk about, and we talk about this in every symposium and every training that we ever do. You got to you got to get your people trained, because if you don't get them trained, they can't testify. And getting someone on the stand that has no computer literacy or computer understanding, and they start talking about the technology crime that they're involved in, they turn into the worst witness possible. You end up losing your case. The prosecutor gets frustrated. It's just a bad day for everybody. So getting someone trained in the uh, with whatever it is that they're actually investigating is super important. And as a supervisor in those organizations, you've got to spend your time working with those local law enforcement officers to make sure they understand what it is they're actually doing. What can they do? What can't they do? And it's sadly, a lot of guys learn stuff from TV. A lot of police officers will pick up, tips and things from Law and Order and these other things, and they'll try to apply them, and they'll end up getting, kind of hit on the head by the judge for doing something silly. And it's and another part of the training is also training your judges, your prosecutors, and others that have to prosecute these cases, so they understand they understand what it is that you're trying to do, and also understand what it is um, the agency should be doing. And I always use this example, and kind of my classic example of lack of understanding. I remember one of my first cases was a Yahoo case at the sheriff's department, and I remember meeting the sheriff in the break room, and he said, "Hey, Pearson, how'd you end up catching this guy? That's a pretty good bust. We got this guy. He's going to go away for a very long time. And we caught a few other people involved." He goes, "So, how'd you guys catch him?" And we said, "Well, it wasn't really that difficult, Sheriff. Basically, what we did is we took the email, and the email had the IP address of the individual, and from that IP address, we went and followed it back to his house. This was back in the days before routers, and it went right to his computer, and there it was." And he kind of shook his head. He's an older guy. He's 74, and been a sheriff forever and ever and ever. And he said, "You know what?" He goes, I am so amazed at computers." He goes, it's really disquieting to think that where I urinate, the computer tracks me." And I had to stand back for a second. I was thinking, what is he talking about? Where he urinates is where the computer tracks him. And then my buddy hits me and goes, "The IP address." And I went, "Oh," so he thought the IP address was the place where he peed. So he thought by him peeing, he left his computer signature somehow, and he was amazed that we could track that. So we had to go back and explain to him that no, that's not what I meant. We had to go through the whole thing of what an IP address and all that kind of stuff was. But it really brought to my mind was just the lack of understanding that people have that don't deal with computers all the time, and uh, the assumption that I had that everybody knows what an IP address is and everybody knows what this is. So, my learning lesson was never assume someone knows anything about computers, especially when you're doing technology-based crimes. Updated criminal codes. Again, we go back to when early on in my law enforcement career, where the fax machine went away and the computer came in, and we went from computer law or excuse me, fax law to computer law, because they changed the name in the code book. And after a while, everybody just read it and went, I mean, this doesn't even make sense. It's ridiculous. But that was their quick fix to accommodate new computer crime laws. Nobody was involved in the definition of these laws that had any experience in computers. It was all a bunch of legal folks and politicians that put together this new code book so they could get it out there to, meet the requirement of one, the federal government, and two, their local jurisdiction that were, screaming for computer crime laws. So we see this happen quite a bit, and it's an unfortunate thing, but it does happen. And then resources tapping federal expertise and equipment related to computer crime enforcement. I would like to say that, that's just a no-brainer. These guys, you call up the FBI and you say, hey, I need to be in that seminar. The problem is there is such a backlog of people that need to be trained. These guys do great seminars. It's getting a seat in the class is really the problem. And all these agencies do great classes. But again, if I send you to class and I'm a 3-man department, now I'm down to 2 men, I have to pay overtime. I have to do all kinds of stuff. So there's times that the sheriff won't even, or sheriff or police chief won't even let you go to class. And then people don't see it as really being their issue until it is their issue and they have to deal with it. And that sometimes, and most times, is way too late. So these are all reasons that go into why state and local has a harder time with investigations. And again, this doesn't apply to all agencies. This applies to a majority of the agencies, but there are several larger departments, again, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, that have phenomenal computer crime sections and departments, and they're constantly doing, kind of case law, precedent-setting investigations, and they're always on the forward edge. The problem is then you have the disparity of the local agency that doesn't have computers. They're still doing paper-based reports that just can't keep up with our computer-based society, and they run into a huge deficit of computer crime. A lot of departments take the stance of burying their head in the sand and just don't enforce or seek to enforce computer crimes, or they say it's not their issue, it's a civil case, take it to an attorney, and that is heard by many people. So again, this chapter is basically an overview of the federal and local government's responsibilities, some of the issues that have come into it, some of the issues that we have with it. So hopefully you learned some stuff about our different organizations and who does what. And with this chapter, you'll get a lot of really good information about the different organizations that are out there. So please read carefully, and we'll see you in the next chapter.